Welcome to Awkward Conversations. Tonight I'm sitting with Maly Mosey. James will be joining us soon. For those of you that followed the blog, 17 years ago, your relationship with my story is just knowing about the things that happened then. A lot's changed in my life, and someone who's made a major impact on me is James. James will be doing the podcast with me. But to understand James' story, I think it's really best if you hear it, not just from me, and not just from James, but to hear it from his wife. So, again, this evening, we're going to have Maly. Maly, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well,
Excited.
I am super excited. We have talked about this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know, with the subject being awkward conversations, we're going to touch on some awkward conversations.
Sure.
We're going to talk on not just the fun stuff, like, how you met James, and then ministry, but also like the night that your life changed and how life has been after that. So we're going to dig into the things that I know a lot of people, when after my son passed, didn't know how to have the awkward conversation with me. And I'm sure you've had a lot of those experiences. And so really, I'm going to try to ask all the awkward questions.
Okay.
That's my job. So let's just get this thing started off. Tell me about, when did you meet James? How long?
Okay. I met James, I guess, around college years. He was already in college. It was my senior year of high school. I met at Kirby Woods Church. I was actually dating one of his really good friends, and he was away at college at UNA. And so he was in town one weekend, and his friend said, I really want you to meet, my best friend. And this is James. And funny story, he had just gotten his tongue pierced.
That's a fun new fact for me. I can't wait to give him grief.
That was my first. He came up and was big personality.
I'm sorry, I can't get over that. Did you see the tongue?
That was like the first thing, he was like showing us his tongue, and this is what I did, and
it's like the Austin Powers episode where he's like, moly, 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 moly. Where could you not?
It was left an impression for sure.
That's okay. I can't wait to unload that one on him. Okay, let's go.
It was good.
So the tongue, and so you got over that quickly.
That was the first. Yeah, he was away at school, so I didn't really get to know him until later on, until he came back to University of Memphis, and then I was in college as well. And our college group hung out. We had a really tight group, and we became friends and got to know him more. We hung out all the time. I mean, as a college group, and just had some really cool. Played ultimate frisbee, and we're always in the gym or eating, just different things to where I got to know him and saw his personality, and big personality. Just it was a lot of fun. Loved Jesus. He leaves an impression. For sure,
So how long passed roughly between when you first met James and when you started dating?
Gosh, I don't even really know. I mean, maybe a year or so.
And then you guys got married. Friends. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we had just been friends for a long time. So we had that, good friendship before. And then he asked me out first date as friends on Valentine's. So neither one of us had a date, and so it was just kind of like a fun thing. Yes, it worked. And so from then we started dating. We dated 6 months, and we're engaged 6 months. So it was very quick.
Wow. Okay. Yes. And then, so again, for the viewers that come from, knowing my story and not necessarily your story. So you have 3 kids.
Yes. We have Riley, who's 18, Oliver, 15, and Evie, 10.
Okay. And then Riley, I don't want to tell too much of her story because one day I want to have her on here. But Riley's about to come up on a big moment soon.
She is. She just graduated, so she's going to take a gap year and go on a mission program, 4 different countries for 9 months for the school year. So it'll be a big, exciting things for her.
There's going to be a lot of tears when she leaves because everything from small children to adults, I think we all feel like she's like, for us, adults, we all feel like she's our niece, I know so many people that say that. And for the little girls, especially that she's kept and babysat, they think of her like a big sister.
A lot of people will miss her for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to cover, and as precious as your time is, I know James is hanging out not too far away waiting on us. So we're not going to touch everything tonight, but let's jump into, give me just kind of an overview of, did you wake up one day and go, you know what? I want to marry a youth minister.
No, I did not.
So was that like, was he an aspiring mechanic? Yeah, I know his family.
No, he was not. Everybody else in the family, but no, he did not get the mechanic genes. No, he definitely was always involved in the church. He loved helping with kids, like in any way, just kind of growing up. So he knew he was going to do maybe something along those lines, but not 100% in ministry, or, didn't know what that looked like. When we dated, same kind of thing with him. Like I knew he was involved, but I didn't know the ministry route was, where we were headed.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until he had worked at Chick-fil-A as like a GM, when we were dating and married. And once we got married, the children's position opened up at our church. Yeah. And somebody encouraged him, several families encouraged him to apply, and that's how kind of we started with ministry.
Well, okay. So you are very honest, and that is one of the things I've always appreciated about you. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want your just gut reaction answer.
Okay.
When he said, I'm going to be a children's, I was going to work at a church.
Yeah.
What was your initial thought? Because you guys were younger then.
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed helping him and being a part of that when we were together. But I struggled with it. I knew he had more of a for sure calling, that he had felt, the Lord directing him that way, but I hadn't really. And so I just didn't know like where my place or what that looked like for me. And so I really did struggle with it, even the first few years of our marriage, like in ministry.
I appreciate you. That's something that so many people, it's like, that are in church, that grew up in church, they feel a guilt if they don't say, hey, I was called to do this, or I heard 3 generations of parents say I was called. And I think to hear that kind of conversation, that kind of language come out of your mouth is going to be helpful for some people. I know in talking with you about things, I would have never dreamed in a million years that you didn't feel a calling. I always told my wife, I said, when I see that woman, and I didn't know your name at the time, I said, every time I see that woman, she walks amongst the girls. They're walking, and she's like right in the middle of the pack. And you weren't on staff when I met you, but you still, I could tell by that point in your journey, you felt led. I'm going to put those words in your mouth, because if you didn't, I felt you were led. I could see it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, that was early on, and I really struggled with it, and God definitely worked along the way in my heart. Earlier when we were first married and in ministry, we had small kids, and I still didn't have a chance to like really get plugged in like I would have liked to. And so again, struggled through all of that. Like, what am I supposed to do? What that looked like. And even, I mean, we have a long story of where, we were in ministry and then we weren't, and then God allowed that door to open again. And the last few years, maybe last 4 or 5 years, that's when I think God has we were able to do ministry together. And that's when I had a bigger passion to really get involved with girls and students and enjoy being able to do that with him. Yeah. So it was a different aspect, but I really did enjoy that.
Well, thank you again for sharing that. Because I mean, I went off topic, but it's important. Again, one thing that I enjoy about you and James is that you are both very transparent. Like, there's no guessing games. Like, you're easy to have conversations with. You're always honest. So you can handle the hard questions. And I know, like, when I was a young youth minister, I don't feel like there were a couple men that made an impact on me. But that day-to-day, like, someone that you could talk to and ask about, hey, is it normal that I'm, wondering if this is what I should be doing? Right. Like, I know I believe in God. You go through all these things for me in early church, watching things behind the scenes. And so when I fell away from faith, it was really interesting because, and some of this we'll share later, and I want to share with James. Of course, I share a lot with him that he may forget, and then he remembers the next day. But that'll come more to the story for people that don't know James' story.
Right.
I know I keep alluding to that, but I want to hold on to that for him. Anyway, when I first saw James speaking, I had lost my faith for a better part of a decade, a little over a decade. Actually, longer than 13 years, I think, at that point. And he was preaching or teaching, and I looked at my wife and I said, if God is real, then X would happen. And I'm going to hold on to that story. But what's crazy is James having no clue who I am. X happened and James was a part of it. And so getting to know you guys later, and for you guys to not know that I was lurking in the shadows, watching the way that you guys respond to try to figure out, are these guys like just another version of me like 15 years ago, 17 years ago? Sure. Like, do they really believe? Is this a job? And then to be able to sit here and ask you the hard question and hear you say, there was times where I wondered in the beginning, and here I am now, Okay, well, I don't want to beat that one up too much. So let's fast forward. We've, James has been in ministry for, let me see, it was September of 2023. It was when James had what we're about to talk about. Okay, so how long had he been in ministry for at that point?
So we've been married almost 20 years. So, the first year we were married, that's when he started in ministry. He was a student pastor in Ohio. We moved there to help with the church plant, and then out to Las Vegas as well for students. Then we had some years off, and then the last couple of years he was back in ministry. So I don't know. I mean, roughly 16, 15,
Yeah,
16.
Enough that Riley grew up in it.
Absolutely. Yes, she definitely did.
Like all of your kids to that point.
Yeah.
We have been friends now for, I guess 3 or 4 years. But even through James night where he had his aneurysm until now, I've never asked you this question. And we have always talked about, one day we want to share James' story, and it's your story. And that's something I also want to mention. It's not just James' story. It's your story. It's your children's story. It's your family's story. It's the church's story. But mostly yours and James. And so let's fast forward. It was September when James had his aneurysm. Yep. Walk me through that day, as much as you're comfortable, as far as you want to go, or as little as you want to get into.
Okay. It was September 9th. Really just it was a Saturday. We had my nephew's birthday party in the morning, and Evie's, our youngest, birthday party that night. So busy day. And I think about, I go through it a lot just to see if there's, was there anything off? Was there anything I could have noticed? And there really wasn't. It was just a normal, somewhat day. And, he came home from my nephew's party, and he took a nap, but nothing like crazy unusual. Got up, and we had a great time at Evie's birthday. And it was just mainly our family and some friends of ours, the Greenwoods. And we had, we're cleaning up, wrapping up. Everybody had left except our friends. And, a little bit of time went by, and I realized I didn't know where James was, and figured he was in the bathroom.
Which
something.
We know is
totally
I do
normal.
know this part. Yeah. We do know that's very usual, like a normal
not rare.
thing. Yeah.
And so a little time went by, and then I was like, okay, this is weird. I'm going to, just check on him. So I think I texted him and nothing. And so I thought I'll just go check, make sure he's good. And went upstairs and, knocked on the door and didn't hear any response. And so I was like, that's kind of odd. And kept trying. And so at that point, the door was locked, and I was trying to get him to respond, and I thought, okay, I need to get in there. Something's weird. And,
I like, not to be awkward here, but men, we're guilty of putting our AirPods in, for somebody that could ask the question, I don't know anybody would, but let's say that, he's not answering.
Right.
You know, that's, to me, that's what I think of. The text I get from my wife, everything okay in there? And I'm thinking, just been to Golden Corral, you know, like that. So you have, aren't there like, are there 2 doors to that bathroom?
There's one that, like, you know, the sinks are there, and then there's another one that goes into the toilet and shower.
Yeah.
So I went and got my friend Chris to see if he could help get the door open, and struggled a little bit. Finally, he had to take the doorknob off and everything. We got through the first one, and James still wasn't responding. And so we were finally able to get to the second one, and same thing, but James was behind, like his legs were behind the door. So we had to, finally push our way in there.
So that's when you started in it.
Yeah.
Kind of I mean, because right before that, you didn't know he's on the floor. So when you start to...
and like there's resistance.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, something's really wrong. And so we got to him, and he was somewhat alert, but he had thrown up a bunch, and just was kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But was still somewhat talking. But was just kind of not making sense.
Yeah.
And Chris and I were, trying to just make sense of the situation, see kind of what's going on. And, looking back, I wish I had called 911, right then, but we just didn't. It was just weird. I didn't know if he was sick from something he ate, and just, I don't know.
This may be a horrible way to describe it, okay? But like, I can remember finding people, like I haven't always run in the best crowds. Mm-hmm. I remember finding people drunk in the bathroom.
It kind of was like that. I mean, it was a mess, but I knew he didn't do that. Yeah. But like all these things
that's
were going
what
through
you, it wasn't like you walked in, you're like, oh, I know what happened. He's had an aneurysm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But Chris and I we got him a little cleaned up, and we're trying to talk to him, and some things would make sense, and then other things were just off the wall. Like his sentences were gibberish and talking about all kinds of crazy things that hadn't happened. And so again, we just knew something wasn't right. Got him downstairs. Kind of, our kids were still there.
So you hadn't even at that point, there was no thought to like, okay, let's get the kids it was enough that you're alarmed.
Yes, and we got him downstairs. Like he was able to walk downstairs, and we just walked to our bedroom, and so the kids knew something was going on, but just not exactly. And so we were he laid down and was resting, and I thought, okay, we probably need to take him somewhere. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so it wasn't until then, there were some other weird, like his speech was not making sense. And shortly after, he ended up having a seizure. And so that's when we called 911.
And so this is all before midnight, same night?
It was about maybe 9:30ish or so, I guess, when all that
and
happened.
I mean, there was a lot going on during that time in your life. I remember, like James was working multiple jobs.
Yeah.
The Greenwoods were actually headed to Florida.
Yeah.
And you guys were attached to the hip, and have always been. We all love the Greenwoods. I mean, they're
really special.
Yeah. So there was a lot. I mean, they were literally leaving wasn't it like a week?
Chris had already moved, and so that was kind of the cool thing. He had come back in town, and it just happened to be that weekend. So it was
and he's such a calm guy.
He is. Like he's very calm.
You couldn't ask for a better person to be there during that.
Absolutely. Like God definitely put them there that night, hands down.
Yeah.
Just for how Leslie was with my kids, and then how Chris was, to help me. He drove me to the emergency room, and just he was the one that sat with me there, and just was very calming, and God definitely put them there that night.
Well, I think this is the hardest part of everything we're talking about. So let's close the loop on this.
Yeah.
So he takes an ambulance to the hospital, and you ride with Chris.
Took him,
and then what happens between then and I know when I saw you, because I woke up to a text. Actually, Courtney had the text and said, hey, James I think she said at that point, had a stroke, maybe and an aneurysm or something. And my first thought was like, what James do I know that's like 80 years old? Like that, I'm not thinking James. Like, and I went through the 2 James that I know from church. And then she said, James Moseley. Yeah. And anyway, we end up at the hospital. But I don't know. So close my window here and help me understand what happened between the ambulance and when I saw you that morning, if you can remember.
Yeah. So they got him back there pretty quickly, and I had to sit in the waiting room at first while they were doing everything for him and running some tests. And so one of the nurses came out and got me and took me back to a quieter little place, and Chris came with me too, and she just said that he had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and I was like, okay, what is that? I didn't really know those terminology, all that stuff. And so she explained a little more. And even then hearing it, like I don't know. I mean, even the word aneurysm, like you hear it, but I didn't know what that really entailed or meant. And so I think there was a lot of shock there. I just kind of broke down right there, but I didn't know what that meant. Yeah. He was instantly, they put a breathing tube in, and so she said, you can come see him and we're going to get him, he's going to be in ICU, but that it was really a miracle that, I heard the word miracle several times that night, but, that he was even, there, and they just said, we're going to try to do everything we can.
Well, I've never told you this, but I have two friends that I grew up with. And I won't say names, on here because, but that died of aneurysms, and they're young. That happened young. Yeah. And so everybody calls the heart. I think it's the heart attacks the silent killer. I feel like the aneurysm is like the silent. It's just more rare.
Yeah.
So okay, so you heard the word miracle a lot. At what point did they induce him into a coma?
He was pretty much, once he had the seizure, he was pretty much out. And then I think they induced, he was technically in like a coma for a good while. I don't even, my timeline gets kind of.
Well, when I saw him, he was like in the bed, and I still have a picture that we have just for us, but because I remember like praying with him and talking to him and saying, hey, one day I'm gonna show you this picture, bro, and you're not gonna believe it yourself, Yeah. But I remember that. I remember the timeline that's blurry for me. Do you know how long y'all were in the hospital, roughly? Not counting Atlanta.
Just hospital until we left to Shepherd Center, probably about 4 months.
Okay, and then so in those 4 months, I saw him go from sitting in a coma to like, hey, it's 50-50, is what you're hearing like medically from the medical opinions, to hey, he may walk, hey, he may see, to hey, he may move his arms, to hey, he may talk, to like all these things that we don't know what he's going to do. Yeah. And I remember the very first time he spoke to me. Have I ever told you this?
I don't know.
It's really, really funny. So you said, hey, look, if some of the guys want to sit with him, we couldn't talk you out of leaving the hospital. So we finally, all the wives got together and said, look, you're going to leave the hospital. Yeah. Sorry, you're going to leave. And we're going to all take turns sitting with him for like an hour. And we somehow coerced it into like 2 hours with you. But I got to go first. And when I went in, I sat down, and he had blood in his eyes, so he couldn't see. It seems like was it both his eyes at the time?
And we really didn't know that until later on. But yes, he had lost vision in both eyes from the blood that had settled.
So okay, that's when that was. And the very first thing I said to him, I said, hey buddy, it's Ben. Do you know who I am? He said, no. Where's Courtney? That was literally the first thing he said to me. He thought it would be so funny to like mess with me. Yeah. And such clarity, it showed me that James was still in there. Yeah. Now, to share the full story, because I think when people like to share stories of miracles, they like to come in with all the amazing things that happen. And something you and I have talked about that matters to both of us, because we both had pretty life-altering stories of things that happened in our life, is that for someone out there going through this struggle right now, and they look over and they go, you know what? That's not my story right now. I don't see the miracle. Yeah. And it's easy to be and when you're in it, to not be encouraged. And something we want people to see is you can be encouraged. Sometimes the miracle, it doesn't come the way you picture it.
Yeah.
But so if I left that story with, where's Courtney? Like, it would be like, oh, James is great. Everything's perfect. Okay. What that tells me is James is in there. It wasn't 5 minutes later, he was squeezing my finger so hard, the blood stopped pumping to it. He didn't even know he was doing it. And then he started asking me why Desmond Bain, for those that don't watch the Grizzlies, he is a former Grizzly player until a week ago that Maly also loves, but I will leave it at that. But he asked me why Desmond Bain was dribbling across his feet. And then a couple minutes after that, he told me he's got to get to the PC to upload the files. I don't think I've ever heard James use the word PC in files.
Probably not.
Yeah. So I guess my point is, miracles come in all shapes, flavors, sizes. You are currently living still in the process of the miracle today. Let's dig a little further into that. I feel like we've talked about like the hard moment, the moment that when we all go through some sort of difficult time in our life or tragedy, or maybe it was something that just, affected our kids, affected us. It's that one event, and people following a story. I can tell you this personally. Now, let me make sure I qualify what I'm about to say, because there were a lot of people that checked on me and that were kind. But when I went through my tragedy, I ran from everyone. I did not want to be near anyone. I didn't want to hear another story about God needing another angel and Jesus needing more than I did. A lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned people, were there trying to help, but I didn't want to be around people. And when you have a blog and people are watching it, it's like watching a sitcom. It's like watching a story play out. And, for people that watch a lot of television, there's always a happy ending, And I think when there's not a happy ending, we don't know how to respond. That's where awkward conversations, that's where the thought came from. As I've had a lot of awkward conversations. It also came from the fact that James and I seem to stumble into awkward conversations all the time, saying things that we're like, wait, did I just say that? So, all right. So you never, ever complain. Neither does James when it comes to like the challenges that you have today. I think the story for a lot of people stopped when was it a Caring Bridge site?
Yes.
When that stopped. And that's where the story ended. James, living, breathing, walking miracle, which absolutely, I believe that with all my heart. Every time I'm sitting next to him on Sunday, which, he and I don't miss sitting next to each other on Sunday, or his hand's on my leg and people are like,
his buddy.
He's my bro. But every time he's singing and he's belting at the top of his lungs, I can't help but think living, breathing miracle.
Yeah.
I never want to qualify a miracle. I also want people to know that your story doesn't end there. What's life like now? Because you are attending as a person in the crowd, on Sundays. And James, again, at no fault of the church has been amazing for you guys and for James. I mean, amazing. It's just the capacity to be able to work a regular, working job it's just not something that James is capable of doing right now. What does life look like right now? Like, describe like what a normal day is, and like I know there's things I'd say to James that he remembers from 3 months ago. And I know sometimes there's things he doesn't remember from 3 minutes ago.
Right.
So like, just walk me through like what a day looks like.
Yeah. So I would say, he wakes up and, his short-term memory, all memory is kind of impacted, but short-term memory the most for James. And so, he wakes up and he's very dependent on, like his watch to tell him what day it is, what time it is, what month, or a clock in the,
He used the TV too. He told me
so
something
the TV
about it.
We have like what month and
Okay.
So
that's what he's talking
about.
about.
So he definitely, depends on those. So he'll get up, go in our bathroom, and I have a calendar, a monthly calendar, like right by his mirror, and kind of briefly tells him like what what he's doing today, whether
Yeah.
it's going to memory care center, or if he has therapy or it's the weekend, just those kind of things. I just kind of write a little bit, not everything, but at least to give him enough, like what day it is and kind of wrap his mind around it. So he, even with all of that, he will still ask, what are we doing today? Am I going to Page Robbins? Am I going, lots of questions.
Yeah. So are there basic general questions like, is Maly my wife? I live in Germantown. I have 3 kids. Like, is all that stuck in there?
He has always known, like, I'm his wife. He knows our kids. Now, when it first happened and he could talk and like memory kind of started coming back, ages, that kind of stuff was very fuzzy. I think he still thinks Oliver's stuck in middle school. Like, it's just funny little things that his brain, I don't know. They've just stopped in different areas.
Yeah.
But like, as far as address, he couldn't, had to relearn our address. He still will stop and ask sometimes, like, if that's right. Because we've lived in different places, he can easily get things, mixed around, or where he worked or people he knew, like all of that, kind of is just, it's like his brain's just shaken up and it's all kind of in there somewhat, but it's just a mess.
I will say, I remember, and of course I've always loved James, but one of the things I think was challenging for you in the beginning, which made me feel valuable, was being able to be like James' personal bodyguard. It was like he would wander off, and I mean, it was like, where's Waldo? He's in the crowd, and he's
Good
gone.
Thing he wears hats. That was I always had to find his hat.
And like when he we won't say this on the podcast, but I had to create a technique for him to learn to take big steps because he was taking baby steps.
Yes.
So I got to be a part of that. I got to be a part of swimming in the pool the first time. Like a lot of those physical things,
right?
But the mental things, I think that really scared. I don't want to say scared, worried us the most. Is like if we would go somewhere in public. Yes. It's like
someone had to be with him. I mean, still kind of does, but
but you couldn't lose him for 5 minutes or he's gone. He getting ice cream. Yeah. And then I think the next kind of big step is when our families went on vacation. I remember
that was a big step.
I was really surprised you were up for it, because when we sat and we talked about it, and you're like, it's going to be weird him waking up in a new room. What's that going to do?
Right. Routine is key for him. So, I mean, as routine as you can be.
So does he still use I know he had a book at one point.
Yes. So he, if you see him, he'll always have a little notebook in his pocket, and that's how he kind of can remember what he does throughout the day. Even as far as like, I ate this for breakfast. I, went here. If he's running errands with me, he will carry it around and he will write every single one down. When he does go to the memory care place, like, and I pick him up, he cannot remember. If I say, how was your day? What all did you do? He can't tell me unless he pulls it out and kind of goes through it in that sense. And then things, sometimes, it jogs his memory enough to where he can talk about it from experience, or sometimes he will say, I got nothing, but this is what I did. So, and that's hard.
I think it's easy to separate yourself from the story especially when it's in a blog or it's in writing. It's not, you can still separate from somebody on the screen. But to me, that was why it was so important when we were joking about this podcast. Actually, one of our friends at church, Beth Ann, said, you and James should have a podcast. She said that a long time ago. Said, y'all should have an Instagram. It would be funny. And we always joked about it. And then this happened. You and I talked about, maybe one day we'll just share this story. We didn't know this is what was going to happen. I watch you go through this, and something I hear James say all the time is he talks about how much he loves you. So I'm sure you've heard it, but I haven't told you I was going to say this. So none of this, just for the record, none of this was pre-scripted. Right. None of this was set up. So James says to me, probably at least once every time we hang out, that he doesn't want to be a burden to you.
He's not. That, he, again, it's a miracle, and God has a purpose that he is still here. And I think just constantly reminding him of that is important, because he's not. Can it be frustrating to answer the same question 1,000 times a day? Yeah, but I would much rather do that than not have him here. So
I appreciate you taking that question. I want James to be able to come back and watch this. I'm going to get emotional. I want him to be able to watch this and see that moment, because I tell him, you're not a burden. Is it frustrating sometimes when you ask me, is it community group? Am I at your house? Am I at your house? Is it community group? Are we eating pizza? You just ate. Hey, I'm going to tell, I'm going to tell the girls that you want ice cream. Like all those things. Yeah. It's like, we just went over this 7 minutes ago, but there's never a minute where I go, I don't want to be around you, and I think to ask you that question, the reason I really wanted to just not tell you that was coming, because he knows you better than anybody.
Yeah.
And when he watches this and he sees this, he's going to be proud of you, because he knows you don't like the limelight. I remember at the church when you were asked to speak, and I mean, you'd have thought somebody told you the plague was coming. Like, you don't like attention, right. And like, this is not your thing. I didn't want James coming out here and having to do, when we're doing the podcast, people not knowing the backstory, because I feel like it's going to catch some people off guard, and you're like, I'll do it immediately. And I'm like, okay, that's the right path. What's it like parenting now? Like, how has that changed? Is James able to do the things he used to do? Is he done differently? Does he have a different role?
Yeah. That's probably one of the hardest things for sure. Because he is physically with us. It's just very different.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you how my life is different and my marriage is different than a lot of people's. I wasn't present for about, I don't know, many of those years, as a strict parenting dad, which I know is not the exact same as your situation, but, I just played a different role, and I didn't do it very effectively. Fortunately, my kids are really good. My wife's amazing, and she carried the weight when I couldn't. And so I feel like you're in a season right now where you get to play mom and dad some. And I think the role that he has kind of been assigned to is like another family member. And it doesn't mean that the kids don't love him or see him as dad. They definitely do. But I can imagine that being hard. Does he ever verbalize that stuff, or does he remember from day to day to even be?
He just kind of, he wants to be involved and in the room, with us.
Yeah.
But there will be moments that, God graciously puts in there where he chimes in and gives a little bit of wisdom, but the majority of the time there's not a lot of depth. So when you're used to parenting together and seeking wisdom together and, working as a team, that's not really there anymore. And it's hard to see, like you said, I'm both mom and dad. And at first I really had a hard time with that, because I was like, I've got to be mom and I've got to be dad, where they're missing it. And God showed me that that's not my role. My role is their mom, and to let him fill that gap that is there. And that's been really hard to do. But it doesn't mean I don't step in those times and go play basketball, or try to have those conversations, like James used to do with each of them. And he was always very intentional to finding that time with each of them. And so I think that's hard to navigate, and navigate alone, because like I said, he is there.
Yeah. It's like someone's present.
Yes.
And you don't know which moment he's in his head.
And so I always want, him to feel the freedom to, jump in, and he will sometimes do some of those things, but even to watch my kids, their relationship is very different with him. And a lot of that is just how his brain is healed, or just how it's changed. And their relationships are all very different. I think he will forever see Evie as really little, like a little child. And so how he interacts with her is different from the other two. Like I said, Oliver's stuck in middle school.
Yeah.
It's just
he's like 7 foot tall, but he's
still sixth grade.
Right.
And then for Riley, they all are navigating their own challenges, and so as a parent, like, it's just really taking it day to day and seeing, where I can encourage him to step in those parenting moments, but also to make sure my dependency is in the Lord and not him. Right now.
Yeah. No, I think you worded that perfectly, because so I, and again, there's things I'll share more details about later, but our families are very close, so this about me. One of our good friends at church, also named James, encouraged me to go to therapy. And therapy has been like, I'm just going to tell you, I had a therapist like right after my son passed.
Yeah.
And it was bad.
Yeah.
It was like, it did not help. No, it was not a good experience.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that person is amazing at their job, but they weren't the right fit for me. So this guy that I have that I work with, has given me so many tools, and really more than anything, he just listens. And I got a lot to say. So it's like, I'll walk out of there. I don't know that he gets to say 2 things, but I'll feel great when I walk out. But a couple of the things that like I've taken away, and I won't say this is like word for word what he said, because I don't want to ruin a good therapist message, okay? But we're all on a journey. Yes. And it's easy in the moment you're in right now to hit pause and stop and go, this is what life's going to look like forever. Right. And it's easy in that moment to, when you look at bills piling up and realize like you're a sole income and you're functioning in multiple roles, to see that day as like your freeze frame that's going to continue for the rest of your life.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming if you look at it like that.
It is. And for me, I remember like after my son passed, I just wanted to die, like I literally I thought life will never, ever be the same again. Yeah. And it's not. It's way better. And if I tell somebody that and you say your kid died and your life's better, they're going to think I'm either full of crap or I'm insane. And I can only tell you, when I hear the story of Job, I never understand how taking away, like allowing his children to be stripped of him and then getting new kids, how that's going to make anything better. Okay. But what I also don't understand is how a God that can be in existence from the very beginning of time, how that could even happen. Who created the creator? Those things always stump me. But he knows literally everything. And the way that you're navigating this, I hope that you're encouraged because you encourage people. I think the biggest reason why I wanted you on here is I want people to see the vulnerability of you because you don't hide that. It's just you do such a good job of staying on task that the world does not know, has no clue what you deal with from day to day. And that does not mean that James is what you deal with. What I mean is navigating life. Yeah. And so now to encourage James, we were sitting in community group the other night. And so when we say, hey, the parent role has changed for him, we were sitting there and our community group leader asked him to ask James to share what ministry is like. And he gave him like a vague task intentionally so that James could, share this, this is how I share my story. Yeah. Well, it became James' turn to speak. I don't think, did you know that this was coming? Neither you nor I knew this was coming. And then James preached a sermon that could only be handed down from the mouth of God to his ear. I mean, seeing that moment tells me, it reaffirms that God is present in this situation. And I'm talking a lot here, but I've had a lot of this I wanted to say to you. Another church member of ours, his name's Drew, probably know who I'm talking about. He said to me while James was in the coma, he said, I want, my prayer every day is that James remembers his family, but most importantly, remembers Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I think about that pretty much every Sunday. Like, it made a big impact on me. Yeah. And he does remember Jesus.
He does. And I remember you telling me that. And I think about that a lot, because it can be discouraging to miss hearing his wisdom from the word, and hearing him preach and teach students and my kids. Like, the knowledge that he had and had studied and learned from the Lord is not necessarily there, which I will never understand why, but I know he loves the Lord, and I know he trusts the Lord. And even when he says, I don't know why, what the purpose is or what God's doing, like, I still trust him. And so I'm thankful that he does have that, and he did not lose,
No, he definitely hasn't. I can't deny he believes. There was a man that we found out lost his life this last week, and I know James' first thing to me was, he was like, hey, are you okay? Mm-hmm. He was like, I want you to know you can pick the phone up and call me anytime. And I said, I can't, James, you don't have a phone. I would have to call Maly. And he goes, yeah, but you can call Maly, and then Maly will get me. And I'm like, well, then are you going to ride over with Riley to my house? And again, awkward conversations. James and I like to hypothesize on the goofy and the funny. And that's how we deal. That's how we deal with this life sometimes. It just sucks. Yeah. Like, you look at it and you go, like, why does it seem so easy for these people that don't believe, that, live in their fancy yachts and, travel around the world, the Instagram influencers? That was super important to me, that this podcast is not like that. Mm-hmm. It's super important to James that it's not like that. Mm-hmm. Like, we have ideas of goofy stuff that we want to share out there, but the big message we never want to send is, if you watch this and you think we got it together and your life is so hard, you miss the point.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a point in life where we all get, or not, I think hopefully we all get to where we stop and we inventory what we have. Mm-hmm. Not our cars, our house, not our 401k. I'm married to a woman that loves me. I have 2 kids that seem to still think I'm okay. I mean, they make me feel special. I have a good circle of friends, and those things to me matter so incredibly much. I don't know that I would have valued them have I not had all the tragedy and loss.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just for you, like, what is your takeaway? Like, how are you telling yourself 2025, 2026, as we continue to pray for James' healing? How do you encourage yourself?
I think looking back and remembering too where we've been and what God has done, not even just in the season of an aneurysm, but even back in our life and our marriage, and remembering who God is, what he's done, and that he's not finished. There's always hope found in him. And just because life may look different or still be painful, you're grieving through a lot of different things, that there's still joy. I think it's things like that help, get through each day and help encourage him and my kids and myself, just true dependency on the Lord.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think just community and the people around us too, letting people in, that was hard for me at first. But I honestly don't think that we could we could be where we are today without letting and allowing people to step into our lives and help carry us and show God's love for, for James and for our family and help carry us through in that way.
I have Psalms in my arm, but Mark 11:21-23, Jesus says, if you say to the mountain to be thrown in the sea, it'll be done. And there's more to it, but that's what I always stood on. I have a question I've asked people for many years, and I'm coming up with a new way to word it, so I'm going to try it out on you.
Okay.
You ready for this one?
Sure.
Okay. So in the 90s, a bunch of baseball players, they did steroids, and they hit a whole bunch of home runs. And next to their name in the record books is a little asterisk. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, because they got those home runs while on performance-enhancing drugs.
Okay.
Now you're like, well, that's an awkward conversation, Ben. Where are we going with this? Yeah. All right. Do miracles have asterisks? Does God answer a prayer in a limited capacity, or can you believe for the impossible? Can we still pray for an impossible miracle? Something that by science and human law doesn't seem reasonably possible.
Sure. I mean, I think there's no limit to what God can do, and he can do infinitely more than we can ask. And he allows us to, bring our heart's desires to him and lay it all, before him. And I don't think there is any limit to what God can do.
Well, I know that we have prayed for complete healing. And I know that the thing that I want to encourage you, as I've had to remind myself, and I know you know this, you have way more wisdom than me. Sometimes what our friends see as a miracle, when you're living with a person day in, day out, it's easy to forget because they're James, the person that we love.
Yeah.
I'm glad that my miracle is married to you. It encourages me every time I see him and every time I see you. I'm going to start praying even harder and believing for miracles without asterisks. And I'm going to make sure to start praying with you guys about this. And as we do this podcast together and as we share stories, pray that, God will work in these situations. And I want to ask you one final question, and I'm going to just withdraw. And I want you, this is going to sound a little weird, but there's a camera right over here to my right. I want you to take a glance at that camera. And if there's someone out there that's in the early stages of their miracle, that they're listening to this, and this is very important to me. As important as your story is to me, I think the reason it's important to me is because I fell out of faith, and your husband was the one that helped lead me back, along with some other people, but he played a major part. There is going to be somebody watching this that is going through a time that we can't even imagine. And to see someone else who's walking that journey, not alone, it's going to be encouraging to hear a word from them. So I'm going to give you that platform. I've given you no warning, and you just say whatever feels right.
Okay. I don't think anyone can ever prepare for, something unexpected that could, change your life in such a big way. But just knowing that you're not alone, that there is a God who loves you and cares for you, who promises to never leave you. And, it doesn't mean whatever you're walking through will feel easy or just get better and we'll be all fixed, but that he promises to walk through it with you. And there's always hope in him. And so don't be discouraged when the days feel long and unending and, you don't see an end in sight, but just know that one day, whether it's here on earth or with him in heaven, that there will be healing and there will be wholeness in him with Jesus.
I think that was perfect. And, again, there's so many conversations we haven't had. When I asked someone, what's a start and what's an end? And then now describe, in your life, what's the start and what's an end? everyone likes to end with the word death.
Yeah.
And we forget that that's really the start. Mm-hmm. And that's terrifying to say because, tomorrow I may not be here. Mm-hmm. And it's sad to think that I won't be around the people that I love. And I want to share one last thing with you, and then we'll wrap this up. But I want to thank you again for being brave to do this. I know it's not your thing. The last lesson that James taught was on a Wednesday night. And you were sitting a few feet from Lauren Daigle, I believe, with my wife at a Lauren Daigle concert, and which you never missed. So I was glad. I think she had to talk you into it. But James, I was at Wednesday night service, and I was listening to James, and James said, he walks down the typical James style. And he said, Sunday's going to roll around and I may not be here. And this is on a video archive. I'm going to ask James, our other buddy James, to see if he can find this, if it's out there, because this happened. And we're 150 people in the room. And James Moseley said, when Sunday rolls around, if I'm not here, I'll be sad if you don't remember me. But all that really matters to me is that you remember Jesus. And that was the last time I heard him speak on a stage. And that will be in my heart forever. Maly, thank you for being on the show. The actual podcast, this was a special episode where we get to know you, get to know James. As the episodes roll out, I know I'm going to love having your feedback, and James is going to be able to share joy just as you've done with us tonight. For those that are out watching this, know that this was a moment that's been a long time in the making. We just didn't want to jump into it. It's an awkward conversation. Again, I say the name because that's exactly what it is. And we're going to have a lot more of these. Some of them will be fun. Some of them will be scary. Some of them, you'll walk away from it and go, what did I just listen to? But I hope at the end that if you're out there and you're struggling with something in your life and you're watching this, know that you're not alone. Know that there are a community of believers out there that will help you. Plug yourself in. If you're in the Memphis area, we go to the Orchard Church. We would love to have you. Come give us a hug. We'll introduce you to everybody we know. I know I will. But again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.